Hey guys, and welcome to Gwent, the Witcher card game. My name is Jaggerous, and yesterday CD Projekt Red announced that they are releasing more than 100 cards in the midwinter update, which I expect will drop just after the Gwent Challenger, which is the weekend of the 16th of December. So just before Christmas, I reckon we'll get this present from CD Projekt Red. And as there's more than 100 cards, start saving your scraps and ore now, because there's a lot of new stuff coming. Not only did they announce this patch, they've also actually revealed what 20 of the new cards do. So we can see some here, including 5 neutrals and then 3 per faction. So we're going to start at the top with the neutral cards and we'll take it from there. So first and foremost, we have Wyvern Scale Shield, which is an item. And CD Projekt Red have previously said that they're adding items as a tag to the game, and that typically you'll find items within, I believe it's Northern Realms. But items are a new card, so this is a neutral item. And as you can see, what it does is it boosts a unit by the initial power of a unit in your hand. So initial power is like base power, so you can't boost the unit and then use Wyvern Scale Shield. Like, this would be ridiculous with maybe Spellitel, for example, Square spell decks, because if you're boosting by crazy numbers, that's going to be, it's going to be kind of ridiculous. So this is what this does, and this first card is a little bit, I would say, underwhelming, because it's kind of similar to Swallow Potion, but no one really plays Swallow Potion. Like, it's nice to have the ability to boost a unit, sure, but ultimately, considering the power of a lot of other bronze cards, this card feels a little bit, I would say, under-tuned. Like, it doesn't feel very powerful, considering some of the bronze cards that we have in the game and the amount of power that they can put out. This feels like it wouldn't be that great of a card. Unless there's maybe item synergies. If you happen to have a card that pulls an item or plays an item, then maybe this card will be played, but as it is, I think it's a little bit underwhelming. Next up, we have Peasant Militia, and then this is where basically the shit is hitting the fan with this patch, because Peasant Militia is a tactics card, and it fills a row with peasants. Now, look at this word fill. So this implies that there will be row limits coming in the next patch. Now, CD Projekt Red have been making a lot of cards agile in the last few patches. They've made it so that you could place them on any row. And they've said that this is to prepare themselves for a upcoming change to the game. And it seems to be that that change is that you now have limits to how many units you can place on a row. Bear in mind that this is a bronze card, so you can have 3 of this in your deck. Now, if you play 3 Peasant Militia, then you've filled your entire board with peasants. Does that mean that there's no more room for other cards? Does cards that then get played take away a card from that row? Like, if you played a card, do you have to then remove one? How exactly is this going to work? We don't know. This is just speculation on my part. But I think fill a row, it definitely implies that units are going to be limited in how many you can place on a row. Otherwise, it would just put infinite units. There has to be a set number for a row to be considered filled. Will we see special things happen when a row is filled? Like, this is the card that's kind of thrown a spanner in the works of Gwent, and it's interesting to see what this is actually going to mean and how this is going to affect gameplay, because it's definitely something that I'm excited about. But beyond that, I can just speculate. So if you guys have opinions on what fill a row means, then let me know in the comments below. So yeah, that is the bronze cards. Moving on, we have this really cool art here for lesser demons. These are not friendly kitties and puppies. These are lesser demons. And this is a relict. So they're starting to use the relict tag more. And when you play lesser demons, this 9 strength unit, you'll notice that the agile unit is gone. Now every unit seems to be agile. And also you'll notice they've actually changed the borders for bronzes and silvers in comparison to gold cards. They've got new borders. So lesser demons, move a unit from your deck to your hand and then discard a random card. So this is where it gets scary, because it's targeted draw, and targeted draw can be really, really useful in certain decks, but it's also a random discard. So you could draw that card that you really want and then discard it. And the chances of that happening are greater the smaller that your hand is. So if you only have 2 cards in your hand and you play this card, you're likely to discard something important compared to at the start of the game. And typically when you mulligan, you want to keep cards that are useful. So a lot of the time you could end up in a situation where you're discarding useful cards. So this is a bit of a wild one. I think it's probably going to be quite good in some discard decks from Skellige, because Skellige already has discarding as a mechanic, so you can still see benefits from discarding, but because it's random, that's a little bit risky. But on the flip side, you do get targeted draw of literally any unit in your deck, which can be useful. But then, I mean, Francesca has that ability anyway. You can mulligan a card and draw any. So this is kind of like every faction's Francesca, but with a catch. And it'll be interesting to see how this card affects the meta. This one I'm a little bit unsure of. But speaking of cards that I think are going to affect the meta, here we have Geralt Yrden. So we've gotten another sign into the game along with Quen and Ard and Igni, which means that we're still missing Axie and Heliotrope, I believe, are the other two that aren't in the game yet. Reset all units and remove their tokens. So this is ridiculous. This hits all of your units and it hits all of their units. So if you're playing a strengthening deck and they're playing a boosting deck, this card is invaluable. We can see here it's got 5 base strength, which seems, fair enough considering its power. It actually originally showed 10 base strength when this website was first posted, so bearing in mind that is now 5 base strength. And this is kind of insane, and I think this is a card a lot of people are a little bit worried about. Removing their tokens means that it removes things applied to the card, so things like resilience, like spying, like lock. Those are tokens, and so if those are removed from the card, then it no longer gets carried over to the next round. Cards may no longer be locked. And it also removes spies, which, is kind of a counter to the Spy Nilfgaard deck that we currently see. And I think this card is going to see a lot of play. It seems, very powerful, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how it affects the game. Saying that, we do have this whole new, row mechanic and stuff, so the game is going to be very different from how it is now anyway. These are just kind of speculations based on current cards, and I think it's fair to say that we don't know for sure how things are going to turn out. Next up, we have a card that goes from being very strong to a card that is completely confusing, and that is Saskia Dragonfire, Draconid Adrian. Banish your hand and draw that many cards. So this is an 8 strength gold card, which banishes your hand. And banished cards don't go to the graveyard. So if you banish a card, it's not in the graveyard, you can't resurrect it, it's just, basically it's gone forever, right? So banish your entire hand, and then draw as many cards as you have in your hand. And I mean, sure, if you only have 1 or 2 cards in your hand, this is maybe playable, but it's ridiculous, right? It is completely ridiculous, because I just can't think, I have no words. I can't think of a situation where banishing your hand is going to be a good thing, right? But saying that, they have said they're adding a new game mode, so if we do get a draft mode, this card could be very interesting in that sort of game mode, in terms of how it sees played, because if you happen to draft a terrible deck, maybe you could just banish all your terrible cards and hopefully draw better ones. The other thing that this card has a very interesting interaction with is current Avalak the Sage. Now, Avalak the Sage, when you play it, you draw and play a gold or silver card from your opponent's deck. Could you imagine if you play Avalak the Sage, you take a card from your opponent's deck, you get Saskia Dragonfire, you banish your entire hand? I almost feel like some of these cards are designed such that crazy things will happen on places like YouTube and on Twitch, and make some cool clips that will bring hype to the game. And I do feel like this card is designed with a new game mode in mind, as opposed to, say, competitive play. This is like a fun card. It's the kind of card I would make a stupid deck around, for example. So in that regard, I like it, but I don't know how competitively viable it is. One thing's for sure though, it's going to have a really sick premium, because all of the dragons do. So moving on, we next have monsters, and you can see our 3 monsters here, 1 bronze, 1 silver, and 1 gold. And the first monster we have is Werewolf. Cursed Beast. Immune, strengthened by 7 on contact with Moonlight. So the first thing I want to point out is that Werewolf has a cursed tag. Now, cursed tags are used in Skellige decks. Skellige has a cursed archetype, and they have a lot of synergy there. But we're starting to see tags from other factions appearing on cards, such as the Werewolf here. The other thing we saw in a previous patch is that Combat Engineer, which is a Nilfgaard card, which gives resilience to a unit, now has the Crewman tag, but Nilfgaard don't have any machines. So what this suggests to me is that potentially we'll see some cross-faction play in the future. Alternatively, it might be that they're going to add cursed synergies to other factions, or they're going to be adding machines to Nilfgaard. But these are a couple things where, CD Projekt Red have been adding tags from other factions to existing cards, which might suggest some crossover gameplay in the future. Who knows? But this is one of the things that we did talk about on the Gwentleman talk show last night when we were looking at these cards. Now, Immune means that this card is not directly targetable. So the card can still be hit by weather. If you use an ability that has a row effect, such as Lacerate, then Werewolf will still be hit, but you can't directly target the Werewolf. So this is interesting. I'm wondering if this means it cannot be locked, for example, and how that is work, and also whether Immune is a token, because obviously with Geralt Erden, he resets tokens. So if Immune is a token, maybe you could remove it with Erden. Now, strengthened by 7 on contact with Moonlight. We don't know exactly what Moonlight is, but I reckon, well, obviously it's light from the moon, but I reckon this is going to be a boon. So in the last patch, they introduced boons as positive row effects. We had hazards, which are like weather, and then we got boons, for example, in Ale of the Ancestors. So I reckon Moonlight is going to be a positive row effect that you can apply, and then all of your werewolves that are in the Moonlight will be strengthened. Ultimately, though, this does mean that we're potentially going to be getting a werewolf archetype and a Moonlight kind of archetype. You know, we have fog decks, we have frost decks, so Moonlight decks, I'm excited to see. I think that would be really cool. And it's nice to see the way that factions are developing beyond their current set archetypes. You know, monsters, we have like Death Wish, we have Weather, we have Consume, but now we're starting to get, you know, werewolf decks, for example, and that's something that's really going to be cool to see. Next up, we have Striga, and Striga is a relict and also cursed. So again, tying in with this other factions getting cursed units, it's just a little bit interesting. And this is a 5 strength monster. Deal 8 damage to a non-monster unit. So she hits units that are not monsters. And this is a little bit intriguing because on the tin, it's like 13 points, right? You got 5 and you got 8. So on the tin it's 13 points, provided there's a non-monster unit to target. Now, generally, you're not playing monster mirrors, and even within mirrors, often people play non-faction cards. So this card, you have a disadvantage in the mirror, but ultimately it's, I think, an interesting card. And people are saying, you know, is this going to be enough points? This is only 13 points, right? But then you also have Weaves Incantation. So this is a version of the Crones. Weaves Incantation, Relict Mage. Choose one. Strengthen all allied relics by 2, or play a bronze or silver relic from your deck and strengthen it by 2. So we can use Weaves Incantation to play Striga, which gives an extra 6 points to this combo, which makes it a 19-point combo, which is quite nice. If you add Roach in there, then it becomes a 23-point combo, and suddenly we're seeing tempo plays. And also, I believe that Crones, regular Crones, are relics, which means actually what you can do is you can use Weaves Incantation to play a Crone, which then pulls all of the Crones from your deck, and then also pulls, you could potentially also pull Roach, and suddenly, you know, we're getting a huge number of points from one play. Admittedly, that's using 4 silver slots, 3 Crones and Roach, but it does make Weaves Incantation really interesting. And then if you happen to not have something that you want to draw, say you've already played your Crones, if you play Weaves Incantation, it then buffs all of those Crones, so 2, 4, 6 extra points, plus the 4 on Weaves Incantation. If you're playing more relics, like you've already got Striga on the board, there's a lot of kind of interesting ways that this card can be played. And I think it's good for targeted draw, and if you don't happen to have a targeted draw situation, then I think it's still got power. And I'm liking that they're adding these kind of choices to the game. So after monsters, we have Nilfgaard. Here is Nilfgaard, and this card, Viper School Witcher, is really interesting. So it's a Witcher unit, and you deal 3 damage, but you increase the damage dealt by 1 for each alchemy card in your initial deck. So your initial deck is the deck that you build in the deck builder. So this doesn't include alchemy cards on things like, say, Kira Metz, where she can spawn a Thunderbolt potion. That wouldn't be included. I mean, you're not playing Kira Metz in Nilfgaard anyway, but the point being, this is based on how many alchemy cards you have in your deck. Now, at the moment, that most commonly run alchemy card is Mahakam Ale, the one that buffs 3 units, and Nilfgaard does have Vikavaro Novices, and Vikavaro Novices, when you play Vikavaro Novice, it plays an alchemy card from your deck. So there's already alchemy synergies in Nilfgaard, and I really like this card because I think, you know, alchemy synergies are going to become a really big thing, and it's going to be fun to make an alchemy deck. It's going to be fun for Nilfgaard to have archetypes that aren't just spies and aren't just reveal, but also part of me wants to just make a deck that has as many freaking alchemy cards in it as I possibly can. You know, we could make a huge alchemy deck, run these Witcher dudes, and then discard everything with Saskia to ensure that we find the cards that we want. It's totally fine. This is going to be, it's going to be a lot of fun. But you know, this is 10 points minimum if you're running alchemy cards, which I think you would be if you're going to put Viper School Witcher in your deck, then you're putting alchemy cards in your deck. Otherwise, what's the point? But if you run, say, 3 Mahakam Ales, that's suddenly 13 points, and with 6 removal, which is quite strong. So this card, I'm really interested in how it's getting played, and I'm wondering if it's maybe a little bit too strong, not overpowered, but maybe a little bit overtuned, I would say, based on the current set of cards. You know, hopefully we'll see more alchemy cards within this set, but for now, you know, that's kind of it. One thing I do want to add is that if you look at the layout of the cards here, I assume that they're going bronze, then silver, then gold, which you can see kind of across the board here. So bronze, silver, gold. And if you look at the positions of the units across this entire section, what this suggests, I'm not saying this is guaranteed, but what this suggests is that we're getting 4 gold cards per faction and 5 silvers. Bear in mind, we do know we're getting new leaders, so I'm assuming new leaders would fall into these gold cards, but it looks like at least, 4 gold cards and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 silver cards. So that's something that I just want to point out. I don't know 100% if that's going to be the case, but that's what I would predict. If I was a betting woman, that's what I would place a bet on that, So back to Nilfgaard. Cadaverine. Something about cadavers. Cadavers are like dead bodies. Venom. Cadaverine venom. Item, so it's got that item tag. Choose one. Deal 2 damage to an enemy and all units that share its categories. Or destroy a bronze or silver neutral unit. Now, this is an item, so I guess items aren't just a Northern Realms thing. I stand corrected. Or maybe this is part of that thing where tags are occurring across factions, like we saw the curse tag, and maybe that's another hint, I don't know. So, Venom, choose one, deal 2 damage to an enemy and all units that share its categories, so plural categories. So, if you're hitting, say, the werewolf, you're hitting all cursed units and all beast units. And some units, have a lot of tags, so potentially this Venom, you could be hitting a hell of a lot of things and dealing a hell of a lot of damage, depending on what your opponent plays. Alternatively, if they just filled a row with peasants, assuming peasants all have the same tag, then you could just kill all of their peasants. So, I guess if peasants... I'm assuming peasants don't have more than, 2 health here, but, you could damage all of their peasants. And then alternatively, if you don't find a situation where that's useful, you can destroy a bronze or silver neutral unit. And this wording is interesting because it says bronze neutral unit or silver neutral unit. Now, at the moment, there are some bronze neutrals which are spawned, for example, cows or peasants. So there are bronze neutral units that can be spawned by special cards, but at the moment, all of the bronze neutral cards are special. So does this suggest that we might see bronze neutral units in the future? That would be kind of interesting. Alternatively, it's silvers, but again, it's only neutrals. So I think that mostly you would be using this Venom for the first effect, the damaging enemies with categories. Machines, for example, that's another category. But on the flip side, you do have this destroying a unit alternative, which may come in handy. I mean, it really depends on what they add to the neutral pool in terms of cards. Otherwise, I guess you could kill Roach. It's kind of useful. 4 point silver. So, last but not least for Nilfgaard, we have the Letho Kingslayer, Witcher. Choose one. Destroy an enemy leader on the board and set self to 11. Or play a bronze or silver tactic from your deck. Now, this is really flavorful because I believe in Witcher lore, this is based on Witcher 2, so spoiler warning if anyone doesn't want to know, just skip ahead a little bit. In Witcher lore, Letho kills Foltest, so I believe this is Foltest's arm. And as Foltest is a leader, having an ability where you kill an enemy leader is really neat. There's a really cute little nod to the lore, he killed Foltest, you can use Letho to kill Foltest, he is a Kingslayer. And when you do, you set his strength to 11. So if you're killing a strong leader, imagine if you use this on Unseen Elder, that's going to be a huge number of points and boosting yourself. But on the alternative side of things, what if you use this on King Bran? That's not very good. You get 2 points of damage plus the 11. So it's still not a bad point play, but it's maybe not as strong as you would think. Though we are getting new leaders, so it's going to be interesting to see how Letho Kingslayer interacts with new leaders. Alternatively, you play a bronze or silver tactic from your deck. And the tactics that we've just seen for bronze is this peasant militia. So we can use Letho to rally the peasant militia, for example. Alternatively, silver tactics cards. At the moment, we have Decoy and Commander's Horn. So this is kind of a little bit like John Natalis, but for Nilfgaard, in that you can do that. And I really like this card because I feel like it would fit into lots of different decks. There's more or less always going to be a situation where killing an enemy leader is useful. The situation that it wouldn't be useful is if they've played their leader and then you draw this card after that. So it makes sense to also run some tactics cards, but cards like Commander's Horn and Decoy are generally quite useful anyway. So I can see Letho fitting into lots of different Nilfgaard decks. Moving on, we have Northern Realms, and we have this special card here, Winch, Special Tactic. Spawn a bronze Northern Realms machine and boost it by 2. So spawn means it creates one, whereas summon, I believe, pulls it from your deck. And I've been told that this doesn't let you pick any machine, it gives you a choice of 3. So it presents you with 3 of the existing Northern Realms bronze machines. You pick one, you play it, you boost it by 2. And I can see Winch having synergies with Henselt, because if you happen to not have your Henselt target in hand, or your opponent destroys your Henselt target, you can Winch and hopefully find one of the targets in that 1 of 3. And because you can have up to 3 of these in your deck, you have multiple chances of trying to find it. On top of that, it's a tactics card, which means you can draw it with John Natalis. So you can use John Natalis into Winch, into a boosted machine, deal damage, and then maybe Hensel out more machines, for example. There's lots of kind of different choices for this card. And whilst the random nature of it is going to be maybe a little bit of a problem, none of the machines are inherently terrible. People make fun of Catapult for not being very strong. And the Trebuchet, for example, the Trebuchet cards aren't necessarily considered the best, but they're still, they still provide you with damage and they still provide you with value. So I think this is going to be quite an interesting card. And I think I'm going to have some fun playing around with it in a machines deck. Next up, we have Vincent. And again, you should notice that the borders for the silvers and bronzes have changed. You can see that again here with Nilfgaard. The sun gets a bit more sparkly, and also actually with monsters where there's like claws and stuff. So it's almost like evolving portraits. Anyway, back to Vincent. Vincent is a cursed beast. So see, we're seeing this curse tag cropping up elsewhere, which I think is quite intriguing. Destroy the armor of all units and then boost self by half the value destroyed. Now, this card is kind of insane. I think it's a really cool finisher for Northern Realms armor strategies, and I really like the flavor of it, because this means that those cards that have small amounts of armor are becoming more viable. And cards like Thunderbolt Potion, which applies armor to multiple units, is becoming more viable, because the armor is taken across the entire board, right? Destroy the armor of all units, your units, their units. So you're going to be playing like Vincent Chicken with Northern Realms, I think. Who's going to play their Vincent first and take all of the armor. But this is kind of, really strong. It's half the value, so, it's not as insane as you might initially think. But I do think it's going to mean that those other Northern Realms cards with armor that aren't initially being seen getting played, like Redanian Knight Elect, for example, it's got 2 armor and boosts the units adjacent to it. If you can play this as a finisher to get extra value out of that armor, then I think Vincent is a really interesting card. And it also means that if you're running a strategy with Trollolol and your Trollolol gets artifact compressed, then it's okay, because you can still utilize armor from other places. And cards like Stennis and Shani, which put armor on units in smaller quantities, they're also going to be getting buffed by this because of the ability to kind of take that armor from more or less anywhere. But he isn't drawable with reinforcements, so it's worth pointing out that he doesn't have any of the tags required for reinforcements. Next up, we have Selt Kirk, Unit Officer Cursed Agent. So there's Cursed again, and if you see his premium, basically he turns into like a skeleton. It's amazing. You will understand his curse tag. Duel an enemy, 3 armor. Now, duel, I'm a little bit confused by. We've kind of talked about this a little bit with other people, but the effect, I think, is that you hit a unit with your strength, so in this case 7, and then if that unit doesn't die, they hit you back with their strength. Bear in mind, you've already hit them, so they might have been a 10, but if you hit them, they then hit you back for 3. That would then remove your armor, and then I believe you keep hitting one another until you die. That is my understanding of duel, and I think a lot of people are going to mess up with this card in terms of the maths, because you've got to take into account the armor, your strength, their strength after you've hit them. Like, it gets a little bit confusing. But Selkirk is going to be a decent amount of damage, right? If you hit a unit with 7 strength, that's 14 points. If you hit a unit with 10 strength, that's 17 points, and then he removes your armor. There's definitely ways that you can remove high-value units, and often removal can be very useful for units where they're likely to become bigger. So, for example, the Impera Brigade in Nilfgaard, they get really big. But if you can use Selkirk to kill them while they're still small, maybe if they're on 10 strength, this is, very useful. And I think this is going to be a really intriguing mechanic, this dueling thing. I'm loving, I'm really excited to see how they implement it, what the animation looks like, and exactly how it works, because whether it's the case where they just hit each other once, but I think it's a duel, and if you hit each other once, is that really a duel? I think they have to kind of keep fighting, and that's how I would imagine that CDPR will have implemented this. But definitely a really interesting mechanic and a really flavorful card, so it's going to be cool to see how that works out. Moving on, we have Scoia'tael, and once again you can see the kind of evolution of their borders. But here we have Half-Elf Hunter. Now clearly someone is not showing the proper distaste for Dwans based on the fact that this unit is only half elf. But elf soldier, spawn a base copy of itself. So you get 2 6 strength units. Kind of seems a bit boring. I think it's going to be interesting to see maybe if things happen with row limits. Maybe it is the case that having multiple units is useful. It's also 2 elves. So if we see elf synergies, you only need to play a couple of these to get Aileron out, for example. So maybe having 2 elves is something that's going to be very useful. But at the moment, seeing, 2 6s doesn't seem that great. I guess it works quite nicely also with Teruvial, because you can then get a couple bodies out for her to boost. So there are kind of niche situations where this would be useful. But because it's a base copy, it doesn't work with hand buffing, for example. So it'll be interesting to see how this card kind of works out. I think at the moment, with the current card set, this card isn't very interesting. But I have a feeling that we've got other cards with maybe elf synergies or number of unit synergies where this is going to be better than maybe we first think. Next up, we have Malane. I'm going to say Malane. Maybe it's Milan, I don't know. Unit elf. Deal 4 damage to the units at the end of a row. So a row has, it has 2 ends. It has the left end and it has the right end. So you have 2 ends, which means that this card at most is 13. And this is a unit that I think a lot of people are kind of a little bit underwhelmed by. Again, it's got this elf tag, so we might see elf synergies. But at the moment, it's just 13 points. And often 4 damage removal isn't really enough. At least with Striga, for example, you're getting 8 points of removal, and often 8 points of removal is enough to kill a unit that's going to be problematic in the long run, like Empyrean Forces, for example. But 4 damage isn't really that much, and if your opponent happens to not play any units, then this is a 5 strength card. So, one that I think might not see play, but then I'm kind of hopeful. I think that it's not as bad as people say. It's not completely, terrible. I definitely think there could be situations where this card will see play, but it's maybe a little bit more situational, and it's not going to be an auto-include kind of thing. Next up, we have Isengrim, Outlaw, Elf, Officer. So this is another one of these kind of fun cards. Choose one, spawn a silver special card, or spawn a silver Scoia'tael unit. So it doesn't say Scoia'tael special card. This spawn a special card, and I believe again you get a choice of 3. So this is from the entire pool of special cards. You could get Scorch. You could get Commander's Horn. You could get Last Wish. Could you get, ones from other factions? I have no idea. I mean, it just says Silver Special Card. You could get Monster's Nest. You could get Treason. There's a lot of different cards that you could get with this. And I guess this feels like a card to me that's designed for alternative game modes. So for, say, a draft mode, for example, this is going to be a hell of a lot of fun. I don't think it's a competitively viable card. But I like it also because it gives me an extra Scorch, so when I make another Scorch deck, we can put Isengrim Outlaw in there, and that's potentially a 1 in a huge number of chances of finding an extra Scorch. Alternatively, you get a Scoia'tael Silver unit, and I'm wondering if you get to see the 3 special cards and the 3 Scoia'tael units, and then choose from there, or whether you have to choose whether you want special cards or units, and then choose. Because if it's choice of 6, it's a much more powerful card, and it's much more viable than if you have to pick a subcategory and then choose. Silver Scoia'tael units, I guess you could get 2 Melens on the board. You could get a couple Teruvials. There are interesting silver units, but some of them are very situational. Because equally, you could get, was it Melena, the one that moves units from the row, which is just not a very good card. So you do have choice, though. You have a 1 of 3. So if it does present you with one that you don't want, you have 2 other choices. So kind of intriguing. I think it's going to be a really fun card to play. It's going to be a good card for streaming. It's going to be a good card for, silly YouTube videos. Maybe not competitively viable. So, last but not least, we have Skellige. And Skellige, you can see here they have their new card, Fidget Spinner. Now, this is Bone Talisman. And again, this is an item card. Choose one, resurrect a bronze beast, or heal an ally and strengthen it by 3. So this is kind of like a weak Tour de Rock Armor Smith effect. You only hit 1 ally, and you strengthen instead of provide armor. And then, alternatively, you can resurrect a Bronze Beast. And I think that resurrecting a Bronze Beast is the most kind of useful part of this card. I don't know how viable it is, but getting extra resurrects, I think, is good in, Ceres decks, for example, where you get bonuses from resurrecting. And in terms of Bronze Beasts, the Berserkers, I believe there's a 6-strength Berserker Skellige, and if you kill that, it turns into a bear, the 12-strength bear that goes into your graveyard. So you could use this to resurrect a 12-strength bear. You could use this to resurrect a Savage Bear. At the moment, there's not a lot of options with beasts in Skellige, at least. If you could use this in other factions, there are plenty of beasts, but in Gwent currently there aren't too many beasts in Skellige, and I'm wondering if we'll actually see more beasts within these remaining unrevealed cards in order to see a bit more synergy with this card, because as it stands, you know, if you want to resurrect, you have Priestesses of Freya, and if you want to heal, you have Tordarox, which can hit 2 units. So, you know, both of its effects are on that useful, and Tordarox at least have a 7 strength body, whereas this is a special card, so there's no body attached. So it's not like, oh, you know, at least you get 7 points. It's just a fidget spinner. So we'll see. Next up, we have Darren. Dimon Cursed. Whenever an enemy is damaged, boost this unit by 1. So it's basically old Axeman, which I'm super excited about because I love me some Axeman. So Axeman, it used to be a bronze unit that basically had this effect. And this kind of effect is really useful with weather. You know, if you play rain and multiple units are getting damaged, then this guy's getting boosted. If you play him and then you play Tremors, which then deals damage, you know, multiple units are getting boosted. He's a cursed unit, so you can find him with cursed synergies with like Skal or Shal or whatever he's called, for example. Boost him by 1, so then Yennefer, if you play Chironex and you damage everything, for each enemy that gets damaged, this guy's getting boosted, so you're getting value there as well. I think this is a really cool card. I'm really excited to play it. And I really want to make a Axeman deck involved with these kind of cards. One of those situations where it gives you an extra target. You can resurrect him with Sigurdrifa. You can resurrect him with Restore. So there's definitely ways in which Darren, I think, would be useful. Especially when you consider him. Brokvar, Cursed. So Heim, him, this is this thing here. Not this dude. This is Ulduric. This is him. Choose one. Play a cursed unit from your deck. Oh, look! Darren is a cursed unit, so we can use the Heim, him, to draw Darren. Alternatively, spawn a silver unit from your opponent's deck. So I like him because it gives you targeted draw, and targeted draw is always useful. But if you end up in a situation where you don't have targeted draw, you at least have a RNG, a random element of finding a silver unit from your opponent's deck, which might help you. So there's never a situation where maybe this is completely unplayable, unless you've played all of your cursed units and they've played all of their silvers, or they're not running silver units. I think, like, in a cursed deck, having that targeted draw is really nice. You know, Giels, for example, he's not very useful, but he gives you access to your golds and your silvers. So even though he's not very many points in and of himself, you still see play. I think him is kind of falling into that category, and it's going to be fun to play around with Cursed, and it's going to be fun to play around with Axeman, and I'm really excited for that, as Skellige is my favorite faction. But that is it for the current set of revealed cards. As more cards get revealed, I'll obviously make videos talking about them. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below, whether there's certain cards that you're really interested in, maybe which one has your favorite art, what kind of things you'd like to see, what the hell a jewel is, what does filling a row mean? You know, what do you guys think that means? Let me know in the comments below. Do you think Moonlight is a boon? There's loads of things to discuss, and I'm happy to chat about it with you guys. Which cards do you think are the strongest? Which cards do you feel are the weakest? I think Erden is probably one of the strongest, and stuff like the Wyvern Scale Shield are falling on the kind of weakest side, whereas, you know, Dragonfire is just ridiculous. So yeah, let me know in the comments below. Beyond that, thank you so much for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like, hit that thumbs up button, and you can always subscribe to the channel. Alternatively, you can follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Jaggerous, and find me on Twitter @Jaggerous. Thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic day, and hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye!